Another episode of the Working in Tech live stream. This is a very special occasion because today I have the pleasure of chatting with the multi-talented Chenae Erkerd, or more popularly known as RecruiterCousin. She's she's a recruiter who works in big tech, and she's helped over 140 people land interviews and job offers with life-changing salary boosts. She has made a huge impact across the social spectrum, and that impact has helped her build a community of over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. An author and poet, Chenae motivates the community through spoken word and published books. On this episode, I'm honored to chat with her about her journey in tech, thriving in recruiting, and empowering job seekers. If you stick around, I'm sure she'll be sharing some free game on how you can switch into tech, stand out to recruiters and hiring managers, securing interviews for competitive roles, and negotiating win-win job offers. Did I do justice?
Yeah, you did. Good job.
Nice, nice. So I usually like to start this off at the very beginning, right? One of the things that really inspired me to start this podcast is just us of so many times how eating, these opportunities in tech are. So I want to ask you, what inspired you to pursue a career in tech?
It's more or less what inspired me to pursue a career as a recruiter.
Hmm.
So I am very, very much faith-based and God-driven. And so in my mind, I never imagined working in tech. That was never a goal. It was just kind of something that just happened. So a lot of people seek out tech. That wasn't me. I didn't really seek out anything but wanting to be an attorney. And so when that didn't happen, recruiting, I didn't even seek out recruiting, if I'm honest. That just kind of happened too. And then from there, it's more or less what my purpose has been and what God has wanted me to do from there. And to tech is just one of those things. So I absolutely love my job. I love working in the industry. I love what I do. But I didn't seek it out. I don't have the story of I'm trying to break into tech. For me it's just kind of like, oh, I applied to a job and and it's in tech. So that's kind of how that happened. But I never really had like that. I want to get into tech and that I want that to be tomorrow.
That's interesting. So I think there's something that you touched about your law career not working out and then looking for the next best thing. Can you talk me through a
Mhm.
little bit about the journey?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. I also wanted to have experience on the prosecution side as well, and I wanted to do some juvenile justice as well as some so personal injury. Personal injury was probably one of my favorite parts of the legal field in law school. And so that was like one of my classes, one of my favorite classes. The funny thing about that being one of my favorite classes is that's the only class I ever failed in my life. Like it's the
Wow.
first F I ever saw on any transcript that I had. And the interesting thing about it was the professor that made it extremely like fun and interesting and challenging. But it ended up when I took the class again, it ended up being one of my favorite classes because it helped
Mm,
me. I had to like shift my mind in order to pass the class. So when I passed it, it just became one of my favorite parts of law because I understood it the second time around. So
mm,
when that didn't happen, so I took the North Carolina bar 3 times. I did not pass it, and it from there I was just like, okay, God, what do I do? Because the only thing I ever wanted to do was be an attorney, and I actually wanted to be the first African American woman on the Supreme Court.
mm,
So when not you of course you have to be an attorney first. When that didn't happen, I was just like, okay, I kind of went on this journey of, well, what do I do with my law degree? Because in law school we're not taught how to do different or diverse things with your law degree. We're taught and trained to be attorneys and be in the courtroom or just be an attorney in general. And so I went on a journey to figure out, excuse me, what that would look like. And that was a very hard journey. It took me from December of 2015 to January of 2020. So a tad bit over 4 years. And so when people say, "Oh, I've been looking for a job for this these amounts of months," or whatever. I don't think it's fair for me to go, oh, you all right. Like, I don't think it's fair because everybody's journey is different. But I do understand from the job seeker's perspective of what it feels like to have to look for a job for a long period of time.
Mm,
So I was introduced to a woman called Renee. So Renee was a recruiter for Duke Temporary Service. And from there,
bless you.
excuse me, from there, it wasn't a sneeze, it was a cough, because this
Mm.
cough would not get away from me. So but thank you, I appreciate it. So Renee introduced me to Danita Alston, who actually taught me how to be a recruiter. And then from there, I just learned about the candidate experience. I learned how to recruit. I learned a lot of things that a lot of people need to know as a job seeker, and they need to know as a recruiter. And so a lot of what I talk about, a lot of like the templates that I wrote and all of those things, I got from higher education in healthcare. And I teach people how to apply those things in different industries, because I wrote them in such a generic way that they can be applied anywhere. And so
Mm,
the goal has been to try to prevent people from having to go through what I've gone through, and to try to make the job search as easy as possible, because it was not easy when I was looking.
mm. And that's a very nice segue into my next question. So, how did you navigate that initial job application process to get your first role?
So in law school, we're taught that your application isn't complete unless you have a cover letter. So I am a fan of cover letters, while a lot of people are not. I am a fan of cover letters. Most people think it's an old age thing that you have with your application, but and I'm not sure if it's still like popular in the legal field, but I know that when I was looking for a role, it was popular. So I had a cover letter for every job that I applied to, even the current job that I have. I had a cover letter for that job too. And even if the interviewers or hiring leaders didn't necessarily read the cover letter, I felt like at least it's there. I've recruited in an industry before tech. I recruited in an industry where if you did not have a cover letter, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but I've seen hiring leaders pick the person with the cover letter over the person who did not include the cover letter. And that was in a totally different industry, but it made sense to tell people not to discard totally the cover letter. And I've also had people who have used my cover letter template based on the cover letter that I wrote myself. They've used that template and said it made a world of difference because it gave them the space to be able to explain their transition or the pivoting from one position to another, where your resume doesn't give you the room to do so.
That's a big unlock. So, one of the things that you talk about here is resources, and I want to dive into that a little bit more. So, in terms of like, the resources and tool that helped you develop your skill as a candidate for these roles, what were some of those things? Given that your formal training was in law, as you mentioned.
Honestly, someone actually having the patience enough to teach me. So
Hmm.
I don't think when I was looking for a role, I don't think I knew how to really like stand out as a candidate. So it was Danita who really taught me how to stand out as a candidate. When I interviewed in front of, so Danita was the very first person that I interviewed in front of that hired me, even though I interviewed the way I interviewed. So when she when she interviewed me, it's so interesting because now I look back on it and I'm like, oh, you were so ill prepared for that interview. But when she interviewed me, I was so over it. Like I was so over looking for a job at this point that the first question she asked me was, "So tell me what you know about Duke Tip." And I was like, "I don't know. I know a little bit. I looked it up, but do you mind telling me a little bit about it?" And I went and I didn't even think about it being a terrible answer. I just thought I am so over this job, this searching for a job and interviewing and all of this, that at this point I'm just like whatever. So she told me about the told me about the program. She told me about the job. but she said she could tell that I was tired. And so
Mm,
she didn't use that against me because she was just like, and she even said, I was going to send somebody else to interview you, but I'm glad I interviewed you because
mm,
she's someone who will understand and will understand where you are and won't necessarily hold how you interviewed against you. And
mm,
so that was the first time I was shown that kind of compassion that I now give to candidates. That was
mm,
the first time that was, even though she didn't have to necessarily advocate for me because her and I were the only ones in the room. That was the first time I felt advocacy for me, even though she didn't technically have to advocate to anyone for me.
mm,
It was a place of like, I understand how you feel. I'm applying the human aspect to this, and I'm going to give you a shot. She also had to hire me because we were in the elevator and somebody said, "Oh, you gonna hire her?" And she was like, "Well, yep, guess I am now." So she said, "I wasn't gonna tell you no, like right there." So she literally took me under her wing. She taught me how to be a recruiter, and honestly, the job wasn't initially a recruiter. The job was a compliance officer. And then in the midst of me being a compliance officer, she the whole department like could notice a difference in the way I took notes and the way everybody else took notes, because I'm a very detail oriented note taker. So everybody was like, your notes are like amazing. And I'm just thinking, this is the product of being in law school where your notes got to be clear so you know what the professor is talking about. So it went from that to, like, a lot of people know me as this like very confident, very self-aware, very like fun, silly energy, positive energy, as well as no nonsense.
mm,
So it's so I exemplify that even being a temp recruiter with Danita. So it was times where I would, if I had a question, I would go to the VP's office to ask the question. I would go knock on the door and be like, "Hey, I got a question." And so he would so later she told me that he respected me for doing that. And I said, to me, it didn't make sense. I was just like, I don't understand how it was that made him respect me, because in my mind, I'm just asking a question.
mm,
She said that she said I walked with the conviction that I'm going to ask a question no matter who you are. Whether you are the CEO of a company, whether you're the SVP, you're the VP, whoever you are, I exemplified someone who is not afraid to ask a question. And
mm.
that was what made him respect me. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, that's great." Moving on. So from there, she was just like, "Okay, do you want to learn how to be a recruiter?" And I was like, "Yep, I don't have nothing else to do. I sure do." And so she taught me like the nuances and like the ins and outs of the candidate experience. And she helped me to understand like how to communicate with candidates, how to balance between not getting a candidate's hopes up, but also keeping a candidate warm, staying in touch with a candidate, making sure that the recruiter is communicative with the candidate. Like Danita was very specific about the certain things that she wanted to teach me. She also taught me how to continue my no nonsense,
Mm,
because as an advocate, for someone who has a law degree, it's drilled in me to be an advocate. So I want to make sure that everyone across the board is being treated fairly. But I also want to, in addition to that, I also want to give everyone the opportunity to know that no matter who you are or what you look like, you can work in any space that you don't think you can work in. And
mm.
so from that, I've been able to marry the fact that I'm a motivational speaker, I'm a spoken word artist, and now I'm a recruiter. And I get to put all three of those things together, which to me is the perfect career path, because I get to not only make life-changing offers to candidates, but I also get to encourage them in the process.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. I'm gonna touch on just two for the sake of time. So there's
Mhm.
one theme that I realized that you'd mentioned. I think one when we were telling the story about that course you had a challenge with, but also even this job experience, like the importance of having someone who not just having things taught to you, but having someone who understands where you are and is taking you along in that journey can make a big difference. That's one.
Yeah.
Then the second part, which, it's so funny. One of my mentors, or someone I consider a mentor, shared a post on LinkedIn that touched on this specifically, talking about, oftentimes in the job market, candidates are only viewed through their skills, but that if it believes that every individual is at least has three different facets, right? One is their skills, another one is their attributes, and another one is their value. So even in
Yeah.
the moment, while you may not have been communicating that skill clearly, she definitely saw those two other aspects that made her, that endeared you to her. How important are
Mhm.
those two elements?
Um, Ask the question again. I want to make
So
sure I answer
yeah, the first bit was like, how important is it to find someone who takes you along in that journey as a part of learning properly and being in those opportunities? And the second one is like, now on the flip side, as a whether it's a recruiter or somebody making decisions in that space, how important is it to be able to recognize people just beyond their skills
So
or lack
I
of
want
it?
to start. I want to start with the second part of that. So the latter part of the question, as a recruiter, I think one of the gifts that I have is being able to relationship build and have empathy in the process. And so there and only the only reason why I'm able to do it is because I was a candidate for so long. Now add the fact that I'm a black woman, add the fact that I have natural hair, then add these nails. Now add the way I speak. I speak with a conviction that I demand a certain level of respect.
Mm,
A lot of people don't, I've learned the hard way that a lot of people don't like that. But I've
mm,
had to, what the kids say now is stand on business, because the goal of throughout this entire process is to be able to not only relationship build, but it's to have compassion and to know that I don't know your story behind your job search or while you're applying to this role, but I do want you to know that I understand. And that's what most job seekers, I believe, are looking for. They're looking for someone with patience, and they're looking for someone to understand, and they're looking for someone to give them direction. And so for me, that was what it was. It was, I need direction, and I needed someone to say yes. And I remember saying to myself, all I need is for one person to say yes, and I'm a rock it out. Like that's all I kept saying. And Danita was that person for me. And so her charge to me was, she not only did she teach me how to be a recruiter, but she also sent me off into the world, and then I was able to pivot into healthcare. And then the thing is, ironically, we ended up going from supervisor or manager to an employee to, we kind of went into the same department and became colleagues. And
wow.
then she sent me off again and she sent me into tech. And so it's been a place of being able to continue that relationship building part as a job seeker, but you don't relax that when you get your offer. You don't relax that when you start your job. You actually continue that process. When it comes to bringing someone along on that journey, I remember Danita said to me, we were on the phone one day and she said, Chenae, I didn't expect us to continue this relationship. I'm glad that we did, but I don't have the expectation of ever, anytime I pour into someone, to continue the relationship, because my job is to pour into you, teach you, and then to send you off. And so she said, your job is to now pass the baton. So,
Mm,
so all of the people that you see who follow me on LinkedIn, and all of the people that you see who follow me on Instagram or Facebook or wherever other social media platform you follow me, all I'm doing is passing the baton. And
mm,
that may have been to more than 150 people at this point. So it's been like, I got an offer. I helped land a candidate today, and I asked her if she followed me on LinkedIn, and she said, Chenae, yeah, absolutely. And so she was just like, she looked at me like, duh, of course I do. And so she said she said your energy and your light helps us understand that we can also work in the spaces that we don't think we're
mm,
welcome. And so for me, it's, if I can get that kind of feedback from whoever I help, I am I am I am upholding my charge from Danita, which is passing the baton. But I'm more importantly, I'm upholding my promise to God in the very first place, my promise to God, which is why y'all see me do what I do. I made a promise to God, and my promise was, God, if you allow me to be a recruiter, I will never forget what it felt like to be a candidate. And I will never forget my
Mm,
first love, which is motivational speaking and being a spoken word artist. And I have not broken that promise. And so the result of all of the help and the advice and whatever I give is a direct reflection of the promise I made to the God that I serve.
that's so powerful. So you have the unique experience of being both a recruiter and a candidate at the same time. Um, from that first
I was, yeah.
from from that first interview, talk me through like how you would prepare, for example, for an interview today. What are the
Yeah.
steps that we use for someone who's maybe looking to do an interview next week, next month, or wherever? Like, what are your secrets to having a successful interview as a candidate?
So here's what Danita actually. So when she sent me off to interview in healthcare, she actually gave me a question list to she said ask these questions because she was teaching me how to be a recruiter, how to interview as a recruiter. So she said, as a recruiter, these are the questions that you need to ask. And so I took notes on the questions and I asked the very questions that she told me to ask. And so I in my mind, in my interview, I sound like I know what I'm talking about in this interview. And so the interesting thing about going back to relationship building is the woman who interviewed me for my full-time role as a healthcare recruiter was the same woman that Danita used to report to.
Wow.
So the relationship was anybody who comes from Danita is legit. And I was one of those
Hmm.
people.
Wow.
So I wanted that same reputation. If you walk into a room and you say recruiter cousin sent me, or you say Chenae sent me, and you go, oh, come on. That's the goal. The goal is
Wow.
my name should enter a room before I do. Danita
Hmm.
taught me that. So when I interview now, the difference in when I interview now is before, when I interviewed from higher education into healthcare, it was more of, okay, Chenae, say these things, ask these questions, and then you'll be fine, which was very much spot on. When I've interviewed from being a healthcare recruiter, I was then able. What I did was I sat in on all of my interviews in healthcare. So what my colleagues did not do, I can't say all, but what some of my colleagues did not do, I actually did. I scheduled my own interviews. I sat in on all of the interviews that I scheduled, and I actually took mental notes on everything that interviewers would do and say, and everything that candidates would do and say. And I would look at the interviewer's body language. Like I would have my camera off and I would just look at everybody. And I would listen to the candidate, and I could tell when they were rambling. I could tell when they were frustrated. I can tell when the interviewers got bored. And I started to take mental notes on what candidates did correctly and what they did incorrectly. And so all I did was literally put that to work for myself when I interviewed into tech. Now, was my interview perfect? Of course not. Is anybody's interview perfect? Of course not. So all I did was I said, okay, here's what I learned in healthcare. Now, I've never sat in on my interviews at tech, but I did in healthcare for 2 years. So I said, okay, everything I did in healthcare, all of the questions that I've learned that you can ask interviewers because I was on this side, all I did was just write them all down and write them in a universal way so people could know what questions they can ask to make them stand out as candidates. So the difference in how I interview now, I interview with intention, and I interview with a lot of confidence and a lot of conviction, because the goal, I am not here, I am not only here to impress you, but you also need to impress me, because I need to say yes. I need to be the one. Once I impress you, I need to be the one to now say yes. So you need to now sell the company to me. So I walk with this idea. I don't feel like I'm untouchable at all. I don't think anybody, unless you're that somebody, I don't think anybody should walk or does walk with the idea that they are untouchable. But I walk with a lot of conviction, and I walk with a firm belief that not only am I not easily convinced, but I am not going to give you the control of me being so grateful that I work wherever I work, that I don't forget my values and why I actually wanted to work here in the first place.
Mm, that's so important. So I think you touched on some of them, but I was just wondering if there were other challenges that you potentially faced in your early career and how you overcame those.
Oh yeah. Early some of the early challenges that I probably faced, I lack patience. As much as I needed people to be patient with me, I have lacked patience probably the first 30 years of my life. I am now 34. I'll be 35 in May. Um I had to really gain a certain level of patience and maturity that I thought I had that I did not have. I also had to be very open for feedback, and I had to be very open to be coached. And it doesn't mean that you are weak. It doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It just means you need to be coached, and you need to kind of fine tune your skill set a little bit. So that's one of the challenges. It's more of a, I think when you're younger, you have a lot of pride and you don't want to ask for help. So as I've gotten older, I've learned that it is okay to be coached, it's okay to be mentored, and it's okay to ask for help. Another one of the challenges that I faced was being overqualified from
Mm,
a paper perspective, because having a law degree, everybody think either you want to be an attorney, or I had a pastor actually say to me, because I got to a point where I was desperate for a job. So I had a pastor, I asked him if I could be his secretary. The pastor said to me, yeah, no, because you're gonna look like you tried to take my job. And I was just like, damn, like, okay. So the challenge was being judged even by black folk. It was
mm,
being judged by, it was, if I show up in an interview and I look a certain way, it was, you're not going to look my way. So
mm,
like back then, so I'm actually working on growing my hair out, so I'm not cutting my hair anymore. But back then it was, I had long faux locks in my hair, my nails were long, I was dressed professionally, but my hair and my nails were culturally accepted in the black community. And so it was based on my hair and my nails, I may not get this job.
mm,
I had a hiring manager in education who was a white man. I handed him his resume because I was working as a temp in the department, and there was a position opening up in his office where it was perfect. It was a career, like a careers consultant or a career advisor in Duke Law School. And so and so the guy literally looked at my resume. I took him my resume because I was right down the hall. He looked at my resume and he looked at his front desk and he pointed to his front desk and said, "You know what? My front desk person is leaving. You should apply to that."
mm,
And didn't even, and I was just like you don't think about prejudice and you don't think about genuinely being judged for being black and woman until it actually happens to you. I
mm,
look like he didn't look at my degree, both degrees that I had. He didn't look at my experience. All he looked at was me, and in a school that is not predominantly black. And I literally left that office and I said, "Chenae, you better not cry." I was like, "You better not let this man see you cry." And I walked out. I went in the hallway. I went into the bathroom and I just let it out because because you know it happens, but when it happens to you, you can't believe it's happening at the same time. So
mm,
when it happened, I was like, I literally said to myself, I said, "Chenae, suck it up. You better not cry because this is what it comes with." And it sucks to say that, but that's honestly what it came with. And even now, when it's not necessarily as much now when I go certain places because I'm recruiter cousin. So people go, "Oh, recruiter cousin. Oh my gosh, you're a real person." So I get that more than I get like what I look like because I've built my brand. But the early challenges were what I looked like, how my hair was, my nails, pretty much normal challenge of a Black woman.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so powerful and interesting at the same time because that's definitely a struggle that a lot of Black people face. Before I go into the next question, hey, please show Recruiter Cousin some love in the comments. Also, like and subscribe if you've not already. Um, but can you what? I think you've touched on this, so maybe we can cover it briefly. What's the most rewarding aspect of your job as a recruiter?
I get to make offers. If like, I literally, it's not the money, it's not the amount of offers I get to make in terms of like the packages. It's more of the it's more the reaction that I get. So young lady, the offer that I helped make today wasn't my offer. I just stepped in to help, and part of it was because she was my candidate. So when I helped make the offer, and she kind of told me her backstory, and she was in tears, and I told her, I said, it's this right here that makes my job worthwhile. It's this that makes it worth getting on the meeting at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time on a Friday.
Mm,
I was like, it's this. And so that's the rewarding part, but part of it is also giving candidates hope. Because that's what anybody really needs. The job seekers who are in the market right now, the goal is they want to be able to give hope. And
mm,
they want someone to just take their time to just say, "Hey, can you look at my resume real quick?" Like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So it's slowing down. It's trying to give people as much hope as possible, but it's also being able to build the connection with the candidates and being able to make them offers and give them life offering um, packages,
mm.
or excuse me, life changing offers.
So speaking on that same subject of money, what are the different um, what kind of typical recruiter make based on the different stages of the career?
Oh, I started out in recruiting at little over $50,000. And that was like 4 years ago. Recruiters can, depending on the industry, depending on where you live, recruiters can make well into six figures.
Hmm,
So I won't say the exact number because the number, it's drastically different in different areas, but I will say that recruiters can make well into six figures.
okay. So are there specific skills or tools that across the board or maybe just in tech that someone trying to start a career in recruiting needs to have? So whether those are soft skills, hard skills, or just certain technologies that are kind of like tools of the trade for recruiters.
Yeah, so recruiting is a sales role because
Mm,
we have to sell the position to the candidate. We have to sell the candidate to the hiring manager. Like, I hate to say it that way, but like, we selling people, but we have to sell. And so I would say the soft skills would definitely be your organization, your communication, your time management is definitely a soft skill. I would, from if someone is in sales, I would say the amount of customers that they were able to actually like land or sell, or the transactions that they were able to make, could be one. I think like if you're a project coordinator or a project manager, you can also shift over into recruiting, because recruiters also work on a lot of projects and events, which can also be kind of act as projects. And so I think those are just the quick soft skills that you can have, and then the hard skills would be, in if you've seen an applicant tracking system and you've worked in it, but you actually weren't the recruiter. So like, if you have access to the applicant tracking system because you're already in HR, but you may not be running the full cycle recruitment process because you're actually not the recruiter. So they may be kind of applicant tracking system may be a hard skill that you're able to shift over.
So the flip side of that question would be, so someone doesn't even have any of those experiences, right? Maybe they work in a different job, or they were kind of like at the point where you were when you eventually kind of like moved over. what
Mhm.
could they do on their own so they don't have maybe access to an internal tool like an ATS, as you were mentioning? How could you still maybe build some experience or be able to speak to it, going into maybe your first entry level role as a recruiter?
I think you can start as so any coordinator role. So like let's say for example, if you are an administrative assistant or even if you're an executive assistant and you want to get into recruiting, I think your next step would be what we call a recruiting coordinator. In some industries that may be like an HR specialist, and it those are the positions where the recruiter is assisted by the coordinators or the HR specialists. So my experience while working in higher education and healthcare was phenomenal because I got a chance. Like, if I'm honest, like Duke gave me an amazing experience. I absolutely love working for Duke. I can't say that enough. Um, while I was working at Duke, I got a chance to um, experience HR specialists who were also recruiting coordinators. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just called an HR specialist at in healthcare in the specific institution I worked in. Those HR specialists, seeing them and how they assist the recruiters, and then how they're promoted up to what I was, which was a talent acquisition specialist, and then from there you go up from how our promotion track was a talent acquisition consultant. So you can go from administrative assistant because you're working in your calendar, you're a lot of scheduling and a lot of emailing, a lot of like touch base with different people, which is what recruiting is. So I would urge people that if you are even coming out of, let's say, I don't know, let's say in a car dealership, or let's say someone who works in retail. I would say the way I got into recruiting is I started off as a temp first. So I don't know how people go into full-time recruiting like off the bat. I do know that either you start as a temp, which is what I did, or you can start in a staffing company, which is what an agency recruiter is. And then from there you kind of build your skill set and then you work up from there.
That's really interesting. So, are you taking any certifications as a recruiter? Do they even matter in your field?
Yeah, I have a healthcare certification. So when I was in healthcare, Duke made us go through some type of like certification class. So I have what we call it's the certification is called RACER. I completely forgot what it stands for, but off the top of my head, but it is a healthcare certification. So I do have that. You can also, as a recruiter, you can also get your SHRM cert. I say that backwards all the time. You can get your SHRM cert, or you can get your PHR. But most of the time, those certifications are more so for people who may possibly want to get into like a deeper level of a career in HR that is a little bit more deep than talent acquisition.
So those are not necessarily. So those are not necessary for people who are just looking to be recruiters.
No, not. I know many recruiters who don't have a SHRM cert or a PHR. I know a lot of recruiters who don't have a healthcare certification either. I do know recruiters who have like a LinkedIn certification. I think you need to at least have a LinkedIn certification because we use a tool called LinkedIn Recruiter, and the LinkedIn certification pretty much says that you know how to work LinkedIn Recruiter.
Hmm, okay. So kind of like going back to, I imagine like this is your biggest passion, right? Being cousin. What does that mean? And I've seen, like, I see your success stories all the time. I think the very first thing I'd ever seen about you was, I think it was a post that you made on Tech is the New Black, where
Mhm.
you said, everybody deserves to make
6 figures.
6 figures. What a headline, man.
That one post has literally like taken me everywhere. It was that one thing that I said that just went pfft.
It's massive. So,
Yeah.
but that speaks I think it resonates for two reasons. Number one, it's like where it comes from. I think it comes from very deep within you. And secondly, it's like it
Mhm.
resonates. And I believe like the entire brand is around that concept, because you celebrate people getting offers, not maybe even just when you privately coach them or things like that, but even when you do it at your job. So there's something
Mhm.
there that must be exciting for you.
I be
What?
hyped. It don't even be me. I be hyped.
So, talk me through a bit about your journey as recruiter cousin. Like, how do you help people? How do they contact you? How does that whole relationship work?
Yeah, so Recruiter Cousin came about, and this is interesting. So I've always been Recruiter Cousin, even in healthcare. I just didn't really. I did it, but I did more of the coaching quietly because I think I was new to it.
Hmm.
So I wasn't gonna blast something that I was kind of in the works anyway. And so I needed to make sure I was good at it first.
Hmm.
And I knew what I was talking about. Um Recruiter Cousin started to blossom when I started to say things that resonated with a lot of people who look like us. Like I
Hmm.
started to say, if you get your hair cut a certain way, if you have locks and braids and twists and kinks and curls and two-strand twists or whatever you decide, afro, whatever you decide to have, it is still professional. And I would say stuff like, hey, hiring managers, why do you treat candidates as second class citizens as if you have never been a candidate? Like
Hmm.
I would just say stuff like that because I needed to be able to start a very hard conversation that resonated with people, but it helped like hiring managers chime in and say some hiring managers are just not good, and then there are some hiring managers that don't treat people like that. So I only did stuff like that to prompt a conversation so that job seekers can know that not all hiring leaders and not all interview processes are the same, because
Hmm.
there are some hiring leaders that really do care. Recruiter Cousin stuck with me because I want people to feel like family when they talk to me. I
Hmm.
want people to be able to have that space where they don't feel, because of like, I've had people that'll come up to me like, "Oh my gosh, you're a Recruiter Cousin," and I just
Like me, like me.
when people do it, I think it's the funniest thing because I'm just like, well, to me and the people who know me, I'm either Chenae, I'm Nay, or I'm Nay. So so people who know me, they go, "Oh yeah, that's Chenae. I got her number." And or for people who don't, and they go, "Oh my gosh, it's a Recruiter Cousin." And I think it's the funniest thing because in my mind, I'm very humble. I'm just a person who like to help people. It stuck with me because I want people to feel like family when they're talking to me. I want people to feel comfortable to ask a question because you don't know who you can ask a question to, especially if you don't know the person. Like if when you're on LinkedIn and we encourage you to reach out to people for coffee chats, you don't really know the person. So
Hmm.
it's hard to be like, how do I ask for a coffee chat when I don't know them? So I don't want people to feel like that. I want people to feel comfortable, feel like family, and kind of rock with me, have fun, and enjoy this life that we get to live only once. The goal for me is everybody should win. Everybody deserves to win. So
Hmm.
people, when I celebrate people in their offers, whether I'm making an offer to a candidate while I'm working, or whether someone slides in my DM and say, I saw a video that you did, I saw a post that you posted, and oh my gosh, I followed your tips and tricks and I just got the biggest offer I've ever seen. Whenever I get DMs like that, there's a song I listen to every single time, like religiously. It's called It Keeps Happening by Kiera Clark Sheard. And I just cry and I worship and I cry and I work because it's important to know that people that not only do it work, because I'll be like, oh, I hope this work. Not only do it work, but it's a place where when you see people who look like you and you see them winning, don't get me wrong. We want everybody to win,
Yep,
everybody. But when you see people who look like you
it's special.
and they are winning, it is so special. And unless you look like us, you don't know how special that is. It is one of the most special things that you will never understand if you don't look like us.
That's true. That's true. And it comes like because it's so it's just different. I think I'll just leave it at
It's different.
that. So aside, what I want to kind of like take a deep dive a little bit. So tell me about what is like your as Recruiter Cousin, what is the most inspirational story you've seen in what you do? Like somebody coming into the door, maybe not knowing what it's going to look like, what's going to happen, and then had transformational story. I know you have many, but which one easily comes to mind?
I can probably pick two. The first one is a young lady who reached out to me, and she wanted to work at a certain company, and I I like don't I have policy that I have to follow. So if you want to work for a certain company, I can't coach you on a specific, like, this is how you get into this company. I can't do that when I work for the company I work for, because that's against policy. And so what I can do is I can give you general tips and tricks, and then you can kind of apply them where you apply them. So um so this one young lady reached out to me, and this was before I started like on the before I started like writing my templates and all of that. She reached out to me. She asked me just from general tips and tricks, and she was also following my post on LinkedIn. She just scheduled a coffee chat with me, and she asked just for some general tips and tricks on how she can transition from higher education into tech. And so I had never worked in ed tech. So I was I was like, okay, Chenae, well, just give her general tips and tricks from just a general perspective, and then tell her to apply them where kind of tailor where she needs to tailor. And so she messaged me about a year and a half ago, telling me that her salary went from, she had a $40,000 salary,
Hmm.
and her salary increased $120,000.
Wow.
So she went from 40,000 to 160,000.
Wow.
At this point, I have coached someone to make more money than I do.
Wow.
And so so going back to Danita told me one day, she said, Chenae, when you can coach someone or teach someone how to make more money than you, that's how you know you did something.
Hmm.
And so she did the same thing for me. She coached me on how to make more money than her. So she said, now if you can be humble enough and not feel no kind of way when you coach someone and they start making more money than you, that's how you know you did something. That's how
Wow.
you know, like that's how you know, like you bad when it comes to what you got to say. And so she was probably one of the first people who sent me a testimony, and who who pretty much said that she make more money than me. From that, it started to come from, just they started to just roll at that point. At that point, I started to get so many people who started to make more than me that at this point it's like a constant thing now. So one of my more recent ones, I don't remember if I did looked at his resume or I did something. He said I did something. I don't remember. I don't always remember what I did. But he said that I did something, and he was like, oh, and there was a time where I was taking a break from LinkedIn. And I just happened to go on LinkedIn one night and just check my messages. And I saw his message, and um, he said, I just increased my salary, but he is in another industry. He was just like, I see you post all the time, and I just put your posts to work. And
Hmm.
he increased his salary by $114,500.
Sheesh.
The one before
114,000.
hmm The one
Wow.
before that, the one of my even more recent ones that happened in like December of last year. He reached out to me. He was actually already making more than me. And so he was like, I am ready to go up in my salary. I'm like, okay, let's figure it out. And so he just needed to understand how to interview a little better. So we kind of worked through it.
Hmm.
And from there, he increased his salary. He was already making a good salary, but he increased his salary by another like $70,000.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that that happen that I think are unprecedented, that I give glory to God all the time, because all I want to do is be a vessel and just help folk.
Yeah, that's powerful. We're gonna go to the audience questions now. But again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this. Really being a great conversation. So I'm gonna go to the first question. I think this is from Trey. It asks, what does a typical look like for you as a recruiter, and how do you prioritize your tasks?
So my typical day is extremely busy. So if I post something on LinkedIn, it's because it's either scheduled or I already wrote the post, but I just hit post at this time. So I normally try to write my post when I'm not working or like at night. Just because I don't want to give off the appearance that I'm just on LinkedIn during work hours. So I always try to write the post after work at night or first thing in the morning, and then I'll let it sit. And then I literally just hit copy and paste. I hit post, and then here we are. Um, uh, Typical day is me being on LinkedIn because I do have to find candidates on LinkedIn, and I'll sometimes like source in some of our applicant tracking systems that we have. If candidate profiles are sitting there, I'll source there as well. A lot of my days start with a bunch of pings. So internal pings, emails that I'm checking first thing in the morning. I like to check all of my unread emails. I am someone who does not do a bunch of emails. It'll drive me crazy. If I can get under 20 unread emails, I'm good. Like
Mhm.
if I can get under 10, I'm great. So it would be emails, pings. Most of my day is filled with meetings, whether that's team meetings or meeting with candidates, or like today, I actually got a chance to make an offer that my candidate accepted at the very end of my day, literally right before I logged on to here. So it's making an offer. Some days it's like the other day I ran two different presentations. So or two different events. One was a presentation, one was an event. So it's sometimes it's that, sometimes it's planning. So as recruiters, we do a lot of events. And so like I'm actually going to the NESB conference to represent my company in March of this year in Atlanta. So it may be planning an event. It may be partnering with helping my colleagues or my colleagues helping me. There are a lot of things that can happen in the day to day of a recruiter. But the goal is to make sure we're sourcing candidates, to make sure we're reviewing candidate resumes, we're sending them over to hiring leaders, and to make sure the hiring leaders are checking their messages to make sure that they review those applications and then sending them off for screenings, whether that be like a recruiter screen or an HR screen, or whether that be a technical screen, so they can transition over into an official interview.
Great, great. So Rianne asks, was there a time you used an unconventional recruitment strategy that actually worked?
I'm unconventional, Brianna. Honestly, I'm unconventional all the time. So, um, I would say one of the unconventional recruiting strategies is this, and this may not be unconventional. I don't know. I'll just use this as an example. One of the unconventional things that I do is I like to do one, I like to have fun. I would make a lot of videos, whether that be on like TikTok of me and my husband dancing, or um LinkedIn with me and my husband dancing, and so on and so forth. So I've actually, like, some of those videos have actually brought candidates to me,
Mm,
or just me. Like, so I what I also do is I do recruiter cousin pop-up question sessions on my LinkedIn. And those pop-up question sessions come from a place of recruiter cousin or Chenae cannot always get to her DM at this point. I cannot answer all y'all individually. It'll take me hours. So instead, how about I hop on a Zoom, I answer just just kind of random, very generalized questions. And I make sure people understand that I am doing this in an individual capacity and it's not in representation of my company. So
mm,
I always give the disclaimer of I am not talking about my company. I am not talking about specific roles because I am not giving off the appearance of impropriety. And so people have used my just kind of like answers that they took questions that they had from general tips and tricks that I give on my pop-up question sessions. along with the posts that I make on LinkedIn. Like I've literally had people say, I followed your post and got an interview. So
Mm,
so that can be so, or I followed your post and got an offer. So that can be considered unconventional, but a lot of the unconventionalness, so to speak, um, of of my recruitment strategy is genuinely being myself and having fun. And
mm,
that just brings people to me, and it also from a place of just trying to create a safe space where us as minorities can actually come and be safe and feel like we can be ourselves. That has brought a lot of diverse talent to me.
That's that last piece is so important. Um, Again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're having so much fun and learning so much on this stream tonight. John K asks, how do you balance judging technical skills and cultural fit when hiring?
So that's actually not my job to do.
Mm,
So that comes from interviews, it comes from the hiring leader, but it also comes, so where I come in the debrief session. So I'm reading interview feedback. I am sitting in the debrief and listening to the explanations of how a candidate was interviewed. And if I hear something that's weird, like the way my eyes just did just now, if I hear something that's weird, I'm like that behind my computer. I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. Go back to that. What you just said? Like I'll say that. I'll go, wait, hold up. Huh? Can you repeat that? And so for me, it's more or less me being the advocate to make sure that we're not treating any candidate uh, unfairly because of what they look like, where they come from. It's
mm,
totally based on skill.
mm,
So the skills part are being judged by like how they're interviewing.
mm.
So that's what I would say.
Okay. And Asa asks, what's the best way to reach a recruiter like you? What are the typical skills and qualifications that significantly help a candidate?
So I am only specific to one area, and I only recruit for software engineers, program and product managers, and cybersecurity professionals. When I give tips and tricks as general tips and tricks, I am not giving them for a specific like company, so to speak. I'm more so giving it like if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm just looking for general advice on how to be a billing specialist," let's say. And so I'll just kind of give them a roadmap on where to look on kind of the skill sets that they're looking for. But most of the time, I'll tell them to look at job descriptions where different companies and different industries are looking for billing specialists. And what I'll say is study the job description to understand what they're looking for, and then look to see if you have any transferable skills or any direct skills on your resume that would help you land a role here. And I kind of teach people how to structure their resume so it's kind of telling a story. So then that telling or structure of your resume is preparing you to go into your interviews and how you want to talk about what's on your resume. So the qualifications or the typical skills that I look for is significant or specific to the kind of positions or the kind of skill sets I actually recruit for.
Mm,
That you can find on my LinkedIn.
mm. And there was some piece that you mentioned that I thought was really helpful and powerful, but a lot of people miss it. Was when you were talking about the gentleman who increased his salary by 114,000. About how this was someone who you've never even had an interaction with, but still impacted. A
Mhm.
lot of people say, oh, they'll, come in the DMs and ask something like generic, like, can you be my mentor? And it's like, no, not really. Not really, because it's like there's so much value and content out there that if you've taken some time and invested in even following that, again, it's okay to reach out, but it's better if it's like something specific, like for example
Mhm.
the questions that you're being asked here, because then it's easier to answer, right? Like,
Mhm.
when you say, can you be my mentor, it's almost like, can you marry me? Like, no, can we date first? What's your take on that?
I've had many people ask me if I could be their mentor. I've also had people say, So you're my mentor. I've adopted you. I just look at you as a mentor and I go, okay. Um, I've had people ask me that, and I will politely say I don't have the bandwidth to take on any mentees. And respectfully, if I take on mentees, I want to be able to give them the time that they deserve.
Mm.
And I'm pulled in so many different directions that I cannot give them the time that they deserve. So respectfully, I am not taking on any mentees, but in place of that, I do my best to make sure that I'm posting as many things as I find that's going to help job seekers. And I try to do those pop-up question sessions so people can know that they have somebody in their corner.
Yeah, wow, that's really powerful, and I think it's a great way to land it. So we're at time, and I want to be respectful of your time, Chenae. This has been super helpful. You dropped so many gems today. You probably don't know, but you dropping gems always. Were there any other things you wanted to touch on? Did you have any follow her on LinkedIn? I don't know if there's any other thing you want to plug or say.
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name. I'm literally the only person in the world that has a name spelled first and last the way it's spelled first and last. And then Recruiter Cousin on TikTok and Instagram, and then Recruiter Cousin Consulting on YouTube. I want to impart. I would be remiss if I did not say that God is faithful and God is real. I do not wish to disrespect anyone that does not have the same belief system as I do, but I would be doing a disservice to myself if I did not impart to you all that you got it, that you are a winner, even if you don't feel like it, and that this isolation feeling that you may feel in this job market season, just know that you are not alone. And so, if God is for you, who can be against you? So, the goal is to make sure that you stay encouraged, that you take breaks throughout this process, and that you give yourself grace because literally you need grace throughout this process to be successful. But just know that your win is coming, it's just a matter of time.
Wow, you did save the best for last. Thank you so much, Shanae. This has been completely amazing. Hey, thanks everyone for joining. This is the stream for tonight. Again, we took that break last week, but again, see, we came back with a bang. See you guys next week, where we have 3 shows planned for next week. It's going to be amazing. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good one. Thank you.